Hey, good morning, everyone. Just want to do a quick lesson on atheism. This is just in response to some dialogue that I have with a couple people on the comment board. I just wanted to summarize these things. So, to me, atheists are not logical, and we're in a point now, at least certainly in my life, where with flat Earth and a lot of other things that are going on that are blatantly obvious, like corruption in the government, the lies in the media, in the education system, the monetary system, pretty much every system that exists right now on Earth is, it's either completely anti-God or neutral, like not doing anything, that is, faithful, righteous, pure, charitable, any of that stuff, So I don't want to say all of it is completely evil. Even the medical system, is deeply satanic, but in the least, at best, a lot of the systems are just neutral. They're not maybe overtly evil, but they're certainly not pushing any kind of righteous, faith-based, charitable agenda. And so now I speak, just to anyone who will listen, which is very few people, but with more boldness, that God exists, and pointing to the evil is actually a way to, in my opinion, because it's so coordinated, is proof that God exists, because no one would think of all these different things, like why would someone, be so consistent in the deception and the swindling that's happening worldwide. Even yesterday, I was just listening to my cousin book on a hotel, and then they forwarded her to like a credit card, just to have some kind of credit card based, on that hotel or something. And it's like, what does booking a hotel have to do with, do you want a credit card? And like, she didn't ask to be transferred, but they just put her through. And so you can see, like, even at that minor level, and I've talked about an experience I had in one of my past videos about America's satanic lending practices, and how they basically want people, believe it or not, with low credit. Like everybody thinks that great credit rating will help you, and I'm sure it does in some cases, but in some other cases it actually will hurt you, because in many ways they benefit from defaults. Like I remember when I was trying to get a townhouse in New Jersey, they actually, because my credit was pretty good at that time, it would be very poor right now just because like I switched jobs and I'm working part-time. But at that time, it was, I think, pretty strong. And then so they actually, I wasn't a good candidate, because they actually technically want people to go in there, pay, rent, but it's technically a mortgage, but it effectively becomes rent if you default and can't pay. And then they can, they get that money that they've received from you, and then they also can, reclaim the unit. And so, that's happening everywhere, where actually a lower credit score and a bigger risk is actually beneficial for the builder and or the leasing agents. Or sorry, in this case, the companies that are actually selling the units, but it effectively acts like a lease. So, like that exists, and that story is kind of more fundamental, where pretty much everything they want us to borrow. It's like, even if you quote unquote own it or own this unit, even though you still have to pay a mortgage, they want you to always, in general, feel like you're just borrowing something. Like the house that you live in, you're just borrowing it, even if it's paid off, you still have to pay taxes and all that. Everything can be reclaimed and recouped. And so that's sort of the vibration that exists in the world. And that to me is very, very obvious. And the religious and non-religious are wising up to it. So to me, it's like, there's a lot more sort of boldness, behind speaking of God. And I think it's okay. This is a very important time, for God's people. People might have had this, forever, but, as we're developing this and it's growing, it's okay to speak to people, about God, and the potential existence of God. And it's becoming more and more obvious that he does indeed exist, and he exists and is sharing, some aspects of what he's doing through the Bible. So to me, through these interactions on the comment board, there's an individual who is citing the religion's evil as proof that God can exist. To me, this is a very, very easy thing to quote unquote debunk or have a dialogue with, or through apologetics, defending the faith, defending God, not even a particular God, but just God. To me, that doesn't make sense. It's like, if God doesn't exist, then then the people are doing that on their own. Like that's their fault. So you can't use man's behavior as proof that God doesn't exist, because you have to either take the stance that he doesn't exist, and then say, look at what all these people are doing. What's wrong with them? They would be the crazy people. And I agree. A lot of people are crazy in religious circles of all religions. And not to just pick on atheists, like everybody is, can be victimized by, their emotions, jealousy, the lure of power, money, and all this stuff. It's all the same, and a lot of times religious people think that, or the religion gives them a platform to do this, more broadly. And so that's true, but, if God doesn't exist, then people are just doing that. They're just making up some fictitious thing called God, and then, using that as leverage. And, they should be isolated, and ridiculed, really, for that. So don't blame God. If God doesn't exist, don't blame God. That doesn't make sense. So, be consistent. So now if God does exist, there's only two options: does or he doesn't. And then, well, to me, and I say this, there's technically three options. He does exist, and he cares. He does exist, and he doesn't care what's going on, or he doesn't exist. So there's kind of, like, in my opinion, three options. And I actually sort of think that people who say that he does exist and doesn't care, those are, to me, in these days, that's a very, very logical stance to have. But that's a topic that I've gone through in a different video. But so he, if he does exist, then yeah, he does get credit, so to speak, for all this chaos, because people don't, like, wake up and say, I'm going to create a religion called Islam, and or Christianity or Judaism. This is not the ambition of man. Like, people don't just come up with this stuff. Like, yeah, I'm going to start a war. I'm going to build nuclear weapons. I'm going to, centralize banking, and try and enslave humanity. Like, this is not humans. People can do it at a small level for sure. But to do this on such a global scale with this many people, with such sort of coordination, and consistency, I think is the best word, of the mindset around the world, that can only be orchestrated by an entity that is not human. So let's give credit where credit is due. Acknowledging God doesn't mean you acknowledge that he gets credit for everything that's good and great, and we get the blame for everything that's bad. No, that's not the way it is. We definitely take responsibility for the things that we do that we know are wrong, but we just do them anyway. But in my opinion, going to your corporate job and being supporting this system, to me, is also something that's wrong, but we just do it anyway. So there are things that we're doing that are, like, not actually good for us, that are keeping the system going, and God wouldn't, like, get angry about that. He wouldn't be like, hey, why are you, like, going to corporate America, and supporting your family and all that kind of stuff? Like, like, even though I do think that it's evil, and I personally don't feel comfortable with it, and I think God's people should wrestle with this more, like, really, what is the point of going to work daily in a system like this? But obviously people have, mouths to feed and all that. It's a lot easier for me to say because I'm single and don't have kids and dependents and stuff. But, it's not very easy to define who gets blamed for that. It's like, or sorry, in that case, it is easy to find. It is not our fault. We did not make this system. No one person or group of people or whatever. I didn't wake up and come up with this beast system, like Big Brother and all that kind of stuff. So that's not my sin, and I'm not trying to, like, take sins off my plate. There's plenty of them there, but I'm not trying to, take responsibility for things that are just not my. I didn't do this, I didn't orchestrate this. So give credit where credit is due. God is doing this, and then the logical question then, if an atheist is consistent, first they'll stop blaming God for the evil on the earth if they don't think God exists. That's fine. They're allowed to believe that. In my opinion, God programs people to believe that because it doesn't make sense. But that's I've had moments in my life, I would say a majority of my life, where I've been kind of atheistic in the sense that I don't think about God, and we're not required to, and we're not allowed to, in many ways. You can't like raise your hand in class and be like, hey, like, what kicked off humanity? Like, do that in a history class and see what kind of reaction you're gonna get. You're gonna get like a blank stare and then move on to the next question. And ridicule. Don't ever ask anything like that again. Ask in physics proof of gravity. Can we come up with an experiment? I just want to confirm some of these equations that we're doing. Ask that and see where you'll get. So I think kids are doing it more and more now, which is great. But God is not allowed really to be talked about. And in my opinion, again, this is what God wants. This is there is actually a mastermind behind this, believe it or not, and it's for his purpose. In my opinion, we have to have a time or in order to go through life without literally being paralyzed. With it, you have to almost kind of know that God could exist, but he may not, or else we would just be like, if that was like known or like proven or obvious in the time that we live in now, why would you go anywhere? You wouldn't want to move. Like, you would just be like fearful. What's the point? What are you going to go and talk to other people here on earth and listen to their gibberish? Like, if God exists, you would just want to sit there and wait. Like, God, what are we supposed to do? And he would want that ideally, but he also, in this time, I feel like he needs us to go through this. People like God's people are going through all this deception and all that. In my opinion, again, to one of the many reasons I suspect is to love truth, is to be dragged through lies. And I've done a video on that if you want to check it out. It was quick, but so. Okay, yeah. So don't blame God for this, and if he doesn't exist. But if he does exist, just a quick point. So if God doesn't exist, blame the people who are at fault, humans. So why do we not see atheistic leaders speaking out against the evils of central banking? Which I think if anybody is awake, this is obviously evil, to just print money and then charge interest to people for pushing a button. It's like, it's not wrong to have central banking, in my opinion. Like, it's okay, like, but obviously you would want people who are righteous doing that. Those are just people who basically decide what investments are good for the city or the state or the country or whatever. And so they decide, like, people come to them and say, hey, we have a group of people here, we want to build this road for this reason, and it's going to help us do this, or this farm needs expanding because we have more and more people, and we need to be assigned tokens or whatever you call it, credit, currency, in order to assign it to people as they're doing the work to build it up, because they should get credit for it. So that kind of concept makes sense. It's like, because you're dealing with groups of people and things that could benefit groups of people. So fundamentally, you would need some central party. I'm not saying it has to be central in terms of like the International Monetary Fund or the Bank of International Settlements. I'm not talking about that, maybe centralization, but central to a community, a jurisdiction, or whatever. So nothing wrong with that. It has to, again, be run by very, very righteous people, and people who are very much forward thinking and care about the overall community and the earth and all that stuff. But the interest part is the satanic part, because there's no effort expended. It's one thing if those people who are the central bankers were the ones who in past years did all the work, and accumulated all these quote unquote tokens, and then they started lending it out for with interest. That's a different story, but we know that that's not the case. There's new money being printed every day that was not effort was not put forward to to earn that by the people that are doing it. So we know that that's evil. That is evil, and then charging interest on top of that is evil. So this is also the same, critiquing at Christian leaders. There's crickets on this topic. You don't hear that. So we know a lot of, Christianity, and I was just watching a quick snippet on Ravi Zacharias, not to pick on him, but those guys will not talk about, evils of central banking. That's their very source of sustenance those are their bosses, the people that lead all those different things. So they're not going to speak out against them. So atheists, tell them, hey, if you think that, all this evil and all the different religions is proof that God doesn't exist, that all this confusion, okay, well, let's say God doesn't exist. Well, let's go after the people that are doing all this confusion, get mad at them. Don't get mad at God. So now if God does exist, he does get credit for all this. It's just a fact. Like, you can't go into the Bible and say all these things are ridiculous and then, say, how can you believe that? No, it's like, if that's written there, or whatever text you're reading and whatever weird thing that's happening in the world that makes no sense, that, yeah, God did that. We have to believe, especially Christians who follow the Bible, that Jesus Christ died on the cross, and his Heavenly Father orchestrated that. This is the kind of spirit that we're dealing with. Is this a spirit that you really want to speak out against? And I have to catch this. I do this way too often, but this is not some spirit you want to play around with. It's like, and we have to also do the best we can to warn atheists that what you believe have consequences, and it's like, just like the things that I believe and say I have consequences for these videos that I post, if I'm doing them for money or attention or fame or position or anything like that. If there's even element of that ever, that will get sought out, and then it will there's a consequence for it, for sure. And so there has to be. And so, there is a consequence as well for, speaking things against God, not giving him credit. It's like, this is the beautiful thing I think about the God in particular of the Bible, is that he's not afraid or ashamed or trying to throw responsibility on other people. This is his. The Bible says in many places, and credit to the Hebrews for bringing this out to me in the last few years, that God is the author of good and evil. We know that now. We're in the time now where we know that the veil has been lifted. The blinders have come off. We know that everything that's good and bad that's happened to us is because God wanted that to happen. And so we have to ultimately look to him for an explanation, either now or after, if he just chooses to give it to us, of why. But it's him. He authored it. So that's illogical that atheists go down that road of God can't exist because look at all the evil and confusion. So another thing that atheists will have to believe then, if you go down that God doesn't exist route, this cup holder, everything physical around us, has either existed forever. This cup holder is either eternal, the components, the material that made this, either existed forever, or it just came from nothing. At some point, just the components that went into that, the rubber or whatever, just somehow spontaneously. So all the sum of all the elements of the earth, the physical things, the air and all that, had to be created in some kind of spontaneous thing, and then or some amount of it, and then the rest of it kind of grew organically. So by definition, something that exists forever is a characteristic of God. And to me, this is where it makes sense that atheists would have to believe that in this kind of supernatural thing, because if they're to believe that this thing actually existed forever, technically this thing would be have God-like characteristics. So their God will be materialism, will be elements. And so this makes perfect sense. To me, this is exactly why we're in the position we're today, because we're only allowed to worship this, physical things. We're not allowed to talk about what's going on, above the blue sky, what's going on in the spirit world, causality, who started all this. We're not allowed to talk about that in school. Even amongst religious circles, we're not allowed to talk about that. Go to any Christian and ask, why is the sky blue? What's beyond the blue sky? What are we looking at? Infinity? You'll get crickets. So that's not even a shot to atheists. That's a shot critique of us, religious folks. So now we're in this time, in my opinion, where we're free to acknowledge God, and that the end is near, in my personal opinion, supported by events in the Bible. And so, in my opinion, the Bible also speaks of this, and I did a video of this on Mystery Babylon. It's like the sins have reached unto heaven. In my opinion, it's like God has, allowed enough sin to permeate the earth that, this is the extent of it, and this is the most that he would ever infuse into the earth and have it be livable. And it's not livable for a lot of people, and it shocks me why people still live here, and it's not funny, but my life is still fairly calm, and I find it utterly deplorable. What I've been through, not so much what I'm going through now, because I sort of figured it out. I have understanding of the evils, but the essentially brainwashing that I've gone through from 5 years old until I was in school almost continuously till I was 33, believe it or not, because I have 2 master's degrees and a CPA. So all of that kind of indoctrination, overtly or subtle, unnecessary amounts of studying, to now be in a position where being smart is not allowed. If you work really hard in a lot of jobs, that might not actually work out well for you because people start looking at you as a threat, your boss or others. Being intelligent, creative, trying to be efficient and all that will actually, get you looks or fired because people just want to keep their job. And this is not a shot again to those people. They're just doing what they need to do to survive. This system is in place and we did not author it. And so that's just the system that we're in right now. And so, that's where we're at. And so, in my opinion, same thing as with ball earthers and flat earthers. Agnostics to me are the most dangerous people because they just go with the flow. If there's a certain trend, they'll go that way. If certain moral, thresholds are set, they'll kind of go with that. And so to me, it's the same as ball earth and flat earth. It's not a ball earther that's the most dangerous. In fact, I've learned, in the last, I have a long message dialogue with a ball earther, and I, got to understand why they think a level stays level on a curved surface. And I mean, I never thought about it. And honestly, I know it's stupid, but I learned something from them because they'll engage. It's a person who doesn't care what the shape of the earth is, in particular a religious person, that are the most evil, in my opinion, or the most dangerous. Like, with the ball earthers, we can probably, nab a few of them, hopefully, here and there. With obviously God doing that. But, with somebody who literally just doesn't care, doesn't want to talk about it, I mean, what can we do? And there's a lot of those people out there in the world. We know that now. And just from the, the amount that I've interacted with people on these sort of bigger topics, bigger questions, you see that there's a lot of people who are agnostic, and to some extent I'm still slightly sympathetic with them because they have a lot going on. They don't have time to just sit and philosophize all day and, look at the sky and, imagine what goes on above it. They're just, worried about their own life, feeding their family, and etc. So this video got a bit long, but, we can be bold with atheists now. It doesn't necessarily mean we have all the answers, but, we don't have to be ashamed about believing in God. The God has given us a lot of tools to defend him. And not that he needs defense, but this is more for us, we can now come out of this, in my opinion, stupor, literally being stupid, forced to be stupid. We don't have to be stupid anymore. Even if God ends up not existing, obviously I don't believe that now more than ever, but we're allowed to ask questions. I'm allowed to ask hey, why is the sky blue? What's going on beyond that? What are we looking at when I see the sky and it's blue? What is that? And if people don't have answers, that's okay. Just be humble. Just don't say anything. But to start making up some stuff about blue light and Rayleigh fading and scattering and all that, especially to someone who understands those terms, that's we're allowed to say that that's stupid, and it's okay to move on from that or give an alternate explanation, which is indeed that there's water above us and we live under a dome in a closed system. That's what I believe right now until somebody else comes to something else that makes more sense than that. But that's literally what we observe. I think we can start getting to the question, especially God's people, what's beyond that blue stuff, and what is going on in the mind of the entity that made all of this. And so these are better questions, and I feel like though there's not that much time, in my opinion, remaining, certainly not in my own life, but these are better things to ponder than a lot of the stuff we've had to think about and witness, throughout our lives.